This is a project file on the largest urban renewal scheme in Netanya. 11 buildings of between 10 and 40 stories, 1,158 apartments on 30 dunam of the city in place of the 392 homes that stand there today. Everything you are about to see is a computer render because nothing is built. We call it Netanya 001, our own reference, so this stays a file about a scheme rather than an advertisement. We act for buyers on projects like this one, so the useful thing we can hand you is not a brochure. It is the 7 questions we would put to this developer before letting a client of ours sign anything. 5 numbers, 1,158 apartments, 11 buildings, 10 to 40 stories, 392 existing homes replaced, 30 dunam of city, plus 11,000 square meters of commerce and employment, schools, kindergartens, and a park. This is the developer's daytime aerial, and it is the most useful thing on their page, not because it flatters the scheme, but because of what it shows without meaning to. 3 things. The towers dwarf a neighborhood of 8 and 9-story blocks, and that is the change of character you are buying into. The sea is on the horizon, and so is a wide band of existing city between this block and the shore. The scheme is described as walking distance from the beach, so measure that yourself before you price a sea view into what you pay. What is being built is not a building, it is a quarter. 1,158 apartments across 11 buildings from 10 stories up to 40, with 11,000 square meters of commerce and employment, schools, kindergartens, and a park. One developer, one plan. That cuts both ways. The upside is coherence. The shops, the schools, and the park arrive with the buildings rather than being promised by a municipality and never appearing. The risk is concentration. One company's program, one delivery record, and one set of securities standing behind everything on the block. Look at the range. A 40-story tower and a 10-story block on the same site are not the same product. The view is different, the lift weight is different, the service charge is different, and the resale market is different. They are sold under one brochure and one name, which is precisely why the first question here is not about the scheme at all. It is about the building. And look at the base. 11,000 square meters of commerce and employment is a high street, not a corner shop. Ask who owns it and who lets it, whether it is retained by the developer or sold on, and how the service charge splits between residential and commercial owners. That last question runs for as long as you own the apartment. Here is the whole thing, with the blocks it replaces drawn in white. This is what the largest renewal scheme in Netanya looks like on the ground, and the scale is not a detail. It is the single most important fact about this purchase. 11 buildings on 30 dunam cannot go up at once. A scheme this size is delivered in phases, over years, not in one handover. And nothing published says how many phases there are, which buildings sit in each, or what order they come in. For a buyer 4,000 miles away, that is the most consequential gap in the whole file. Which also means somebody moves in while the neighbors are still being built. That is not a criticism of the scheme, it is arithmetic. The apartment in the first building and the apartment in the last are 2 different purchases with 2 different completion dates, 2 different construction outlooks, and 2 different resale positions. Establish which of the 2 you are being offered. This is a Pinui Binui scheme. Evacuate and build. 392 households handed over their apartments. The old blocks come down, and something roughly 3 times denser goes up on the same land. The original owners receive a new apartment, usually larger than the one they gave up. The extra apartments, the ones that pay for the whole exercise, are sold on the open market. Those are the ones a buyer from abroad is looking at. One more number worth knowing. Press coverage in 2021 reported this scheme at around 1,560 apartments. The developer's current page says 1,158. That is normal as a plan works its way through planning. But it is the reason to take your figures from the permit and from your contract, rather than from a brochure, or a press report, or from this file either. Those are the only 2 documents that bind. So, The 7 things to establish before you sign. The scheme is selling, which makes these contract questions rather than planning questions, and on a scheme of 11 buildings, they matter more, not less. Check 1. Which building and which phase? Get the phasing plan in writing and find your building on it. Establish what gets built next to you and when. 11 buildings do not share a delivery date, a view, a service charge, or a resale market. So on a site this size, this question is the whole purchase. And once you know which building, ask what it is like inside it, how many apartments there are per floor, how many lifts there are, and how they are zoned, and what the wait looks like at 8 in the morning, and which floors sit directly above the commercial podium, because in any building of this shape, those are the cheapest floors in it. Check 2. The plan for this scheme was approved in 2023, and plan approval is not a building permit. A permit for one building is also not a permit for the block. Ask which buildings hold permits today, and ask for the plan and permit numbers so they can be checked independently. Check 3. The delivery date, not the date in the brochure, not the date the sales office gives you. The date in the document you sign, written against your building number. For contracts signed from the 7th of July 2022, the statutory ladder runs like this: nothing for the first month, 1 month's rent for months 2 to 4, 1.25 times for months 5 to 10, 1.5 times from month 11 onwards. A contract with no fixed delivery date at all is the clause that costs money. Check 4, your security. Under the Sale of Apartments Assurance of Investments Law of 1974, no more than 7% of the price may be taken from you before a prescribed security is in place. In practice, that is a bank guarantee. Get the document itself and check that it names you and the correct apartment in the correct building. Check 5, linkage. The first 20% of the price cannot be index linked at all, and no more than half of each later payment may be, so at most 40% of the total is exposed. Linkage stops at the contractual delivery date rather than at handover, which is exactly why an unfixed date costs you twice. Check 6, where the 392 existing owners stand. A scheme this size needs a qualifying majority of the current owners and a completed evacuation. Ask how far that actually got, whether any part of it is still in litigation, and what either of those does to the program for your building specifically. And check 7, purchase tax. An Olay using Regulation 12A, an Israeli resident buying a single home, and a foreign resident all pay very different amounts on the same apartment. At Netanya, prices the spread between the foreign resident rate and the Olay rate runs well into 6 figures on a single transaction. Establish which ladder you are on before you agree a price, not after. Now, the city. Netanya is one of the strongest Anglo and French markets in Israel, and one of the few coastal cities where an English-speaking family can arrive and find the infrastructure already in place. It is also not cheap. The average transacted price across the city was about 2.87 million shekels in the first quarter of 2026, against a national average of 2.33 million. But here is the thing nobody selling will tell you. The Anglo center of gravity in Netanya is not here. It is south and west, Iryamim, Agamim, Poleg, and the seafront strip, where the newer stock and most of the English-speaking community sit. Ben Zvi is central eastern Netanya, established, denser, more Israeli, and being rebuilt. That is not an argument against buying. Renewal is precisely how the gap between those two Netanyas narrows, and buying before it narrows is the argument for this address. It is an argument against assuming that the community you have read about comes with the postcode. The ground floor is drawn as a proper street, retail and offices along the frontage, pavements full in daylight. Worth saying plainly that the named shop fronts in a render are set dressing. Nobody has signed a lease in a picture. Ask what is actually let to whom and from when. And between the lower buildings, there is a landscaped park with play areas and paths. 2 questions. Who owns that land when the scheme completes? The residents jointly or the municipality? And what does maintaining grounds of this order add to the monthly charge for as long as you own the apartment? Which brings us to the pictures. This is a top floor corner at sunset drawn towards the sea over the existing city. The view is real. It is also the view from the top of a 40-story tower, and it is not the view from the 8th floor of a 10-story block on the same site. Both are sold under the same name. Here are four more. Note the last one, where every window in every building is lit. That is a lighting decision made by a visualizer, not an occupancy forecast. And note what none of them show, the neighboring blocks that are not yet demolished, the phase that is still a building site on the day yours completes, the traffic that 1,100 new apartments will put onto one street. None of that is dishonest in a render. It is simply not what a render is for. The document that binds is the technical specification, the Mifrat Techni, and where it and the render differ, the specification wins. Everything here comes from the developer's own published project information, from press coverage of the approval and the earlier unit counts, and from Central Bureau of Statistics figures for the first quarter of 2026. Some of it will have moved since, which is why we check rather than repeat. And take Israeli legal advice on the contract and on the securities before you pay anything at all, including a reservation deposit. So here is the offer. We will get you the phasing plan and the permit position for the building you are being offered. We will send you what is actually available by building and by floor, which on a scheme this size moves faster than any published page. And we will read the contract with you before you sign it. That is the whole service, and it is the reason this file exists.